Ozzy Osbourne, the legendary heavy metal icon known as the Prince of Darkness, has faced unimaginable trials throughout his life. From a traumatic childhood to a very public battle with addiction, and even being sued over the tragic death of a young fan and trying to kill his wife under influence of drugs. In this video, we'll explore some of the most heartbreaking and intense moments that have shaped the life of this rock legend, Ozzy Osbourne's traumatic childhood. To truly understand Ozzy's journey, we need to go back to the rough streets of Birmingham, England, where he was born as John Michael Osbourne on December 3, 1948. Ozzy was one of 6 children in a large, struggling family. His father, John Thomas Jack Osbourne, worked long hours as a toolmaker in a factory, while his mother, Lillian, also worked to make ends meet, often taking on extra jobs. Despite their hard work, money was tight, and the family lived in a small, cramped home in the Aston neighborhood of Birmingham. The house was so small that the children had to share beds, and privacy was non-existent. Living in poverty meant that Ozzy's childhood was marked by a constant lack of resources. He wore hand-me-down clothes and often went hungry. The Osbourne family didn't have the luxury of enjoying life's pleasures, and this harsh environment contributed to the difficult upbringing Ozzy experienced. As if growing up in poverty wasn't hard enough, young Ozzy faced severe bullying at school. From an early age, he struggled academically, which made him an easy target for bullies. Ozzy has dyslexia, a learning disorder that made it hard for him to keep up with his schoolwork. At a time when little was understood about learning disabilities, Ozzy was often mocked and ridiculed by both classmates and teachers. The bullying wasn't just verbal, it was physically abusive and humiliating. When Ozzy was just 11 years old, 2 older boys would wait for him after school. These bullies forced him into degrading situations, such as making him drop his pants while they tormented him. Ozzy recalled how terrified and helpless he felt during these encounters, saying it was one of the most painful experiences of his life. He felt completely powerless and alone, unable to escape the relentless abuse. Ozzy's home life offered little comfort. His parents, Jack and Lillian, often argued, creating a tense and unstable atmosphere. The constant fighting at home made Ozzy too afraid to share his struggles with his parents. He felt trapped between the violence at school and the chaos at home, with no safe place to turn to. Despite the turmoil, Ozzy found solace in music. He would listen to the Beatles and other bands of the time, dreaming of one day escaping his grim reality and becoming a rock star. Music became his refuge, offering him a sense of hope in an otherwise bleak world. The trauma of Ozzy's childhood didn't just fade away as he got older, it haunted him throughout his life, contributing to his later struggles with addiction and mental health. The fear and insecurity planted in his early years would follow him, influencing his behavior and the choices he made as an adult. Despite the pain, he found ways to cope and eventually channeled his suffering into his music. His experiences as a child shaped the darker themes of his lyrics and performances, resonating with millions of fans who connected with the raw emotion in his work. Ozzy Osbourne's battle with addiction. Ozzy's struggle with addiction started early in his career. After joining Black Sabbath as their lead vocalist in 1969, the band quickly rose to fame, pioneering the heavy metal genre. However, with fame came the pressures of life on the road. Constant touring, long hours, and the stress of maintaining success. To cope with these pressures, Ozzy turned to alcohol and drugs. At first, it was just part of the rock and roll lifestyle. Drugs and alcohol were everywhere, and for Ozzy, they became a way to escape the stress and anxiety of being in the spotlight. What started as casual use soon spiraled out of control, and by the 1970s, Ozzy was heavily dependent on substances to get through the day. In 1971, Ozzy married Thelma Riley, and they had 2 children together, Jessica and Louie. But Ozzy's addiction quickly took a toll on his family life. His constant touring with Black Sabbath meant that he was often away from home, and when he was around, he was usually intoxicated. His children later described him as being absent both physically and emotionally. Ozzy himself has admitted that he wasn't a good father during this time, even forgetting important details like his children's birth dates. The strain on his family became unbearable. Ozzy's addiction made him unreliable and unpredictable. leading to constant tension in the household. His marriage to Thelma eventually fell apart, and they divorced in 1982. Ozzy later reflected on this period with deep regret, acknowledging that his addiction had caused irreparable damage to his relationship with his first family. Ozzy's substance abuse didn't just affect his family, it also jeopardized his career. By the late 1970s, his addiction had reached a point where it was impossible to ignore. While the entire band struggled with drug and alcohol use, Ozzy's behavior became increasingly erratic and uncontrollable. He would often show up late to recording sessions or miss them entirely. When he did attend, he was frequently too intoxicated to perform. The breaking point came in 1979 when Black Sabbath's guitarist Tony Iommi decided to fire Ozzy from the band. This was a devastating blow for Ozzy, who felt deeply betrayed by his bandmates. In his eyes, they were more than just colleagues. They were like family, having grown up together and achieved fame side by side. Being kicked out of Black Sabbath felt like losing everything he had worked for. After being fired, Ozzy fell into a deep depression. Without the band, he lost his sense of purpose, and his addiction only worsened. Isolated and without direction, Ozzy began to self-destruct. He often stayed in his hotel room for days on end, drinking and using drugs around the clock. This period was one of the darkest in his life, and there were times when it seemed like Ozzy might not survive. But in the midst of this chaos, something unexpected happened. Sharon Osbourne, who would later become his wife, stepped in to help. Sharon saw potential in Ozzy and believed he could still have a successful solo career despite his struggles. She became his manager and encouraged him to get back into the studio, helping him find a new direction in life. With Sharon's support, Ozzy managed to pull himself out of the downward spiral and began working on his solo career. His first solo album, Blizzard of Oz, released in 1980, was a massive success, proving that Ozzy still had the talent and charisma to captivate audiences. However, his battle with addiction was far from over. Even as his solo career took off, Ozzy continued to struggle with substance abuse. The pressures of recording, touring, and maintaining his public image kept him trapped in a cycle of addiction. But with each album and tour, Ozzy's determination to keep going was evident. He had moments of sobriety, but the road to recovery was long and filled with setbacks. Years of substance abuse took a severe toll on Ozzy's health. His body began to suffer from the effects of long-term drug and alcohol use. In the early 2000s, he was diagnosed with a variety of health problems, including tremors, which were initially thought to be a form of Parkinson's disease, but were later attributed to years of substance abuse. With the support of his wife Sharon and his family, Ozzy has made progress in managing his addiction. He has undergone multiple stints in rehab and has worked hard to maintain a sober lifestyle. Ozzy and Sharon Osbourne love story. Ozzy Osbourne and Sharon Osbourne's relationship is one of the most famous and enduring love stories in the world of rock and roll. Ozzy first met Sharon Osbourne in 1970 when she was just 18 years old. At the time, Sharon was working for her father, Don Osbourne, who managed Black Sabbath, the band that launched Ozzy into stardom. Their initial meetings were strictly professional, with Sharon working behind the scenes while Ozzy was focused on his music. But even then, there was a spark between them. The real turning point came years later when Ozzy was fired from Black Sabbath in 1979 due to his severe substance abuse issues. At that moment, he was at rock bottom, with no band, no direction, and his life spiraling out of control. Sharon, seeing potential in Ozzy that others had overlooked, decided to step in. She became his manager, helping him to launch his solo career. This professional partnership soon blossomed into a deep romantic relationship. Ozzy and Sharon got married on July 4, 1982, in a beautiful ceremony in Maui, Hawaii. Despite the romantic setting, their marriage was anything but a fairy tale. From the very beginning, they faced immense challenges, primarily due to Ozzy's ongoing struggles with addiction. The couple went on to have 3 children together, Amy, Kelly, and Jack. Raising a family while managing Ozzy's chaotic rock and roll lifestyle was no easy task. Sharon had to juggle her roles as a wife, mother, and manager, all while dealing with the unpredictable nature of Ozzy's addiction. She became the glue that held their family together, often stepping in to save Ozzy from his self-destructive behavior. Ozzy's addiction was a constant source of turmoil in their marriage. There were times when his drinking and drug use became so severe that it threatened to tear their family apart. Sharon has spoken openly about how difficult these years were, recalling incidents where Ozzy's behavior became violent and dangerous. In 1989, Ozzy Osbourne, deeply entrenched in substance abuse, experienced one of the darkest moments of his life when he tried to kill his wife, Sharon Osbourne. The incident took place after Ozzy had been on a prolonged binge of alcohol and drugs. He was in a blackout, a state where he had no control or memory of his actions. Sharon vividly recalls the chilling moment when Ozzy entered their room, his demeanor unnervingly calm. He uttered the words, "We've come to a decision that you have to die." Sharon described the terrifying look in his eyes, stating it was like a stranger had taken over her husband. As Ozzy attempted to strangle her, Sharon fought back, managing to reach a panic button that alerted the police. When the authorities arrived, they found Sharon gasping for air and Ozzy in a daze. He was immediately arrested and later taken to jail. Ozzy has since admitted that he has no recollection of the incident, describing it as one of the most harrowing and shameful episodes of his life. This event became a critical turning point for Ozzy. While in custody, he was forced to confront the severity of his addiction. Sharon, despite the traumatic experience, chose not to press charges against Ozzy. She decided to stand by him, a decision that was driven by her love for him and a belief that he could overcome his demons. Sharon later reflected on this decision, acknowledging that it was incredibly difficult but ultimately necessary to keep their family together. Ozzy was sentenced to 6 months in rehab, where he began the long and difficult process of getting clean. It served as a wake-up call for Ozzy, who has since worked hard to maintain his sobriety, though his journey has been far from smooth. Sharon has spoken about this dark chapter in their lives, emphasizing the importance of forgiveness and the strength required to support a loved one battling addiction. Their relationship wasn't just challenged by addiction, it was also tested by very public scandals. One of the most significant scandals occurred in 2016, when it was revealed that Ozzy had been having an affair with his hairstylist, Michelle Pugh. The news of the affair shocked fans and put a major strain on their marriage. Sharon was deeply hurt, and the couple separated for a brief period. During this time, Ozzy publicly admitted that he was struggling with sex addiction, and he sought treatment to address the issue. The affair put their marriage in jeopardy, but after some time apart, Sharon decided to forgive Ozzy. She recognized that they had been through too much together to throw it all away. In a public statement, Sharon said that Ozzy had been working hard to overcome his issues, and that she was willing to give their marriage another chance. In May 2017, the couple renewed their wedding vows in a private ceremony, reaffirming their commitment to each other. Sharon later said that renewing their vows was a way of starting fresh and moving past the pain that the affair had caused. Despite the ups and downs, Sharon and Ozzy's relationship has always been rooted in a deep love and mutual respect. Sharon has been more than just Ozzy's wife. She has been his rock, his manager, and his biggest supporter. She helped him build a successful solo career after his departure from Black Sabbath, guiding him through the challenges of the music industry and standing by him through every personal crisis. Sharon's influence on Ozzy's life cannot be overstated. She was instrumental in creating The Osbournes, the reality TV show that brought their family into the spotlight and introduced them to a new generation of fans. The show was a massive success, and it showcased the chaotic yet loving dynamic of the Osbourne family, with Sharon often playing the role of the tough but caring matriarch. In recent years, Ozzy's health has become a major concern. He was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in 2019, and his mobility issues have made life increasingly difficult. Throughout these challenges, Sharon has remained by his side, supporting him every step of the way. In 2022, Ozzy underwent a major surgery that Sharon described as life-altering. After the procedure, Ozzy credited Sharon with helping him through one of the toughest periods of his life. Sharon has also had her own health battles, including a well-publicized fight with colon cancer in the early 2000s. During that time, Ozzy was devastated by the thought of losing her and struggled with his sobriety. However, the experience brought them closer together and strengthened their bond even further. Their love story is not perfect, but it is real. It shows that even in the world of rock and roll, where relationships are often fleeting, true love can endure. Ozzy and Sharon's journey together is a powerful reminder that no matter how tough things get, with determination and commitment, it is possible to overcome even the most difficult obstacles. The turbulent relationship that shaped Black Sabbath. Ozzy Osbourne and Tony Iommi first crossed paths in the late 1960s in Birmingham, England. They both grew up in working-class neighborhoods, just a few streets apart, and shared a love for music. When they eventually formed Black Sabbath in 1968, along with Geezer Butler and drummer Bill Ward, they had no idea they were about to create something that would change the face of rock music forever. From the beginning, Tony was the musical leader of the band. As the guitarist, he was responsible for crafting the dark, heavy riffs that would become Black Sabbath's signature sound. Ozzy, with his unique voice and wild stage presence, brought a distinct personality to the band. Together, they created some of the most iconic songs in heavy metal, including Paranoid, Iron Man, and War Pigs. Despite their musical chemistry, Ozzy and Tony had very different personalities and approaches to making music. Tony was known for being disciplined and focused, often taking on the role of the band's leader and decision-maker. Ozzy, on the other hand, was more spontaneous and unpredictable, with a chaotic lifestyle fueled by drugs and alcohol. As the band's success grew, so did the tension between Ozzy and Tony. One of the main sources of conflict was Ozzy's increasingly erratic behavior due to his substance abuse. While the entire band indulged in drugs and alcohol, Ozzy's addiction was on another level, which began to affect his performance and commitment to the band. Tony, who was trying to keep the band on track, grew frustrated with Ozzy's lack of focus. This frustration often led to heated arguments and even physical altercations. Tony has admitted in interviews that he punched Ozzy several times when the singer's drunken antics became too much to handle. These fights were a reflection of the growing tension within the band as they struggled to deal with the pressures of fame and the challenges of working together. The tension between Ozzy and Tony reached its peak in 1979 during the recording of Black Sabbath's album, Never Say Die. By this time, Ozzy's substance abuse had gotten so bad that he was barely contributing to the band's work. He often refused to sing the songs that Tony and the rest of the band had written, leading to a creative stalemate. Faced with pressure from their record label and the need to move forward, Tony made the difficult decision to fire Ozzy from the band. This decision was not taken lightly, as the members of Black Sabbath had been like family, having grown up together and shared so much success. However, Tony felt that the band could no longer continue with Ozzy in his current state. Ozzy later admitted that he felt deeply betrayed by his bandmates, particularly Tony, whom he had considered a brother. The firing marked the end of an era for Black Sabbath and left Ozzy at one of the lowest points in his life. However, it also set the stage for Ozzy to reinvent himself as a solo artist, a move that would eventually lead to even greater success. The conflict between Ozzy and Tony didn't end with Ozzy's departure from the band. In the years that followed, their relationship became even more strained due to legal disputes over the rights to the Black Sabbath name. In May 2009, Ozzy filed a lawsuit against Tony in a federal court in New York, claiming that Tony had illegally taken ownership of the Black Sabbath trademark. Ozzy argued that all 4 original members of the band should have equal rights to the Black Sabbath name, not just Tony. He was seeking 50% ownership of the trademark. Tony, on the other hand, contended that he was the only constant member of Black Sabbath throughout its entire history, and that his bandmates had given up their rights to the name during the 1980s. The lawsuit was a bitter affair, highlighting the deep divisions between the former bandmates. However, in July 2010, Ozzy and Tony decided to settle their differences and discontinue the court proceedings. Despite their long history of conflict, Ozzy and Tony were eventually able to put their differences aside for the sake of their music and their legacy. In 2012, the original lineup of Black Sabbath, Ozzy Osbourne, Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and Bill Ward reunited to record a new album, 13, and to embark on a world tour. This reunion was a significant moment in the history of the band, as it marked the first time in over 3 decades that the original members had worked together. The reunion was not without its challenges. Bill Ward, the original drummer, ultimately decided not to participate due to contract disputes, and Tony was battling lymphoma at the time. However, the remaining members pushed forward, and 13 was a critical and commercial success, reaching #1 on the charts in several countries. During this period, Ozzy and Tony were able to rebuild their friendship. Both men acknowledged that while they had their differences, they shared a deep bond forged by their years together in Black Sabbath. In interviews, they spoke of their mutual respect for each other's talents and the special connection they had as the creators of some of the most influential music in rock history. Ozzy Osbourne's infamous Alamo incident. The story begins on February 19, 1982, when Ozzy Osbourne was in San Antonio, Texas, as part of his Diary of a Madman tour. On the morning of that day, Ozzy, heavily intoxicated after a night of drinking, wandered out of his hotel room while wearing one of his wife Sharon's dresses, because she had hidden his clothes to prevent him from going out. While exploring the city in this inebriated state, Ozzy stumbled upon a monument that he didn't recognize. This monument was the Cenotaph, a revered statue dedicated to the heroes of the Battle of the Alamo, one of the most significant events in Texas history. Unaware of its importance, Ozzy decided to relieve himself by urinating on the monument, a move that would ignite a firestorm of outrage. As you might expect, Ozzy's actions did not go unnoticed. He was quickly arrested by local authorities for public intoxication and desecration of a public monument. Although he was released later that day after paying a $40 bond, the damage had been done. The people of San Antonio were furious, and the city responded with swift action. Ozzy Osbourne was banned from performing at any venue owned by the city of San Antonio for the next 10 years. This meant that the Prince of Darkness could not play for his Texas fans in San Antonio for an entire decade, a significant blow to both Ozzy and his loyal followers. In 1992, 10 years after the incident, Ozzy made a public apology to the people of San Antonio. During a press conference, he expressed deep regret for his actions and acknowledged how disrespectful his behavior had been. To show that he was truly sorry, Ozzy also made a $10,000 donation to the Daughters of the Republic of Texas, an organization dedicated to preserving the Alamo and its history. Ozzy's apology was sincere, and the people of San Antonio accepted it. The ban was lifted, and later that year, Ozzy was finally allowed to perform in San Antonio again. Ozzy Osbourne and the controversy over a fan's death. In 1984, a young man named John McCollum, just 19 years old, tragically took his own life in his parents' home in California. When police arrived at the scene, they found Ozzy Osbourne's debut solo album, Blizzard of Oz, on John's turntable. The album was playing the song Suicide Solution, a track that, despite its title, was actually written as a warning against the dangers of alcohol abuse. The song was inspired by the death of AC/DC's Bon Scott, who died from alcohol poisoning. However, the McCollum family believed that the song had influenced their son's tragic decision. Grieving and searching for answers, they were convinced that the lyrics of Suicide Solution had pushed their son towards suicide. In 1986, John McCollum's parents filed a lawsuit against Ozzy Osbourne and his record label, CBS Records. They claimed that the lyrics of Suicide Solution were not just disturbing, but were crafted in a way that encouraged listeners to commit suicide. The lawsuit argued that Ozzy Osbourne should be held responsible for the message his music was sending, especially to vulnerable young listeners like their son. The case quickly gained national attention. It wasn't just a lawsuit against Ozzy Osbourne, it became a broader debate about the influence of music and the responsibility of artists. Some people believed that musicians like Ozzy should be more mindful of the potential impact of their lyrics, while others argued that holding an artist responsible for a fan's actions was unfair and set a dangerous precedent for freedom of expression. Ozzy Osbourne and his legal team defended the song, explaining that Suicide Solution was never intended to promote suicide. In fact, the song was meant to convey the opposite message. It was a cautionary tale about the dangers of alcohol addiction and the solution, in the chemical sense, that alcohol can be to one's problems, ultimately leading to a slow and painful self-destruction. The lyrics, Ozzy explained, were taken out of context. The song's message was that relying on substances like alcohol to solve your problems is a form of self-destruction, a slow suicide. Ozzy was devastated by the tragedy, but maintained that the song's true intent had been misunderstood. The lawsuit was eventually dismissed. The court ruled in Ozzy Osbourne's favor, stating that there was no legal basis to hold him responsible for the actions of a listener. The ruling emphasized that while the song might have been disturbing to some, it was protected under the First Amendment, which guarantees freedom of speech and expression. The court also recognized that there was no direct evidence linking the song to John McCollum's tragic decision. While the McCollum family was understandably heartbroken and looking for answers, the court could not hold Ozzy Osbourne accountable for their son's death based on the content of his music. This was not the last time Ozzy would face such accusations. In 1991, he was sued again by the parents of another young man, Michael Waller, who also took his own life after reportedly listening to Suicide Solution. However, much like the previous case, the courts once again ruled in favor of Ozzy, reaffirming the principles of freedom of speech and artistic expression. Ozzy Osbourne's debilitating mobility struggles. Ozzy's journey with serious mobility issues began in 2003 when he was involved in a near-fatal ATV, all-terrain vehicle, accident. While riding on his estate in England, the ATV flipped, causing Ozzy to suffer severe injuries. He broke his collarbone, several ribs, and a vertebra in his neck. The accident was so serious that Ozzy was in a coma for 8 days, and his life was hanging by a thread. Thanks to quick medical intervention, he survived, but the damage to his body was extensive. Following the accident, Ozzy had to undergo surgery to stabilize his injuries. Metal rods were inserted into his body to help support his damaged bones, particularly in his neck and back. Although he managed to recover and continue performing, the accident marked the beginning of his long-term struggles with mobility and chronic pain. In 2019, Ozzy's mobility issues took a dramatic turn for the worse. While at his home in Los Angeles, he suffered a serious fall that caused significant damage to his already fragile body. The fall dislodged the metal rods that had been surgically implanted in his back and neck after the 2003 accident. This not only caused Ozzy excruciating pain, but also severely limited his ability to move. The fall required him to undergo another major surgery to fix the damage. This surgery was risky and complex, as it involved repairing the previous injuries and addressing the new ones caused by the fall. The recovery process was long and painful, forcing Ozzy to cancel all of his planned live performances for the remainder of the year. As if dealing with the aftermath of the fall wasn't enough, Ozzy revealed in early 2020 that he had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Parkinson's is a progressive neurological disorder that affects movement and can lead to tremors, stiffness, and difficulty with balance and coordination. For someone who has always been active and energetic on stage, this diagnosis was particularly devastating. Despite these overwhelming physical challenges, Ozzy has shown an incredible determination to keep going. He has been open about the fact that his mobility issues and Parkinson's diagnosis have been difficult to cope with, both physically and emotionally. However, he has refused to let these struggles define him or stop him from doing what he loves. Ozzy's ongoing battle with his health has involved multiple surgeries, physical therapy, and a lot of personal effort. He has had to adjust to new limitations in his mobility, but he has continued to work on his music and connect with his fans. In 2022, Ozzy underwent what his wife Sharon described as a life-altering surgery, which was intended to help improve his mobility and quality of life. After the surgery, Ozzy expressed relief that he was able to hold his head up again, something that had become increasingly difficult. He also shared that he was simply happy to be alive and grateful for the support of his family and fans. And this was the crazy life of a rock star. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more fascinating insights into the lives of your favorite stars. And as always, stay safe, and we'll see you in the next one.